All right, guys, I'm having a bit of a week, having a real hard time with my 5 a.m. wake-ups, having a real hard time with them. I feel like my memory is actually shot this week. I literally got in the shower and forgot to wash my hair. And I'm like an every other day shampoo person. Like, I shower daily, but I'm an every other day shampoo person. So today is the second day I haven't used shampoo. So that's the life I'm living right now. How's everybody else doing? Anyways, today we're going to be talking about a little bit of an update. This is about the NXIVM story that I talked about a while ago, which was the whole situation with Allison Mack, who played Chloe Sullivan on SMALLVILLE, being part of a crazy sex cult that was disguised as a multi-level marketing scheme at best. So the whole thing was crazy. So just to give you guys a little bit of a refresher, you can go up there and watch the video. I'll try to remember to link it up top. But if not, the main gist of NXIVM was that it was just kind of one of these, like, self-help groups where, you'd pay for classes. It would help you how to try to structure and live your life better, specifically aimed at women. And it was one of the things you could just pay for different courses. In terms of those classes, it was structured very similar to how, like a addiction counseling. But in addition to that, it had this entire level where it encouraged its members to recruit more people. So for example, Allison Mack became involved, according to her, because she was just genuinely looking to feel more fulfilled in her life. That's kind of where you get your multi-level pyramid scheme type thing. Other members are encouraged to go bring in new members. Those new members have to pay for classes. If you want to unlock better classes, you have to either keep paying or pay more money. Does that remind anybody of Scientology? Because it sure reminds me of Scientology. Scientology is a cult. Anyways, all that in itself is very problematic, especially if you kind of look into some of the layers of what went into NXIVM. But then there was that very darker, seedier, full-on cult, disgusting level of NXIVM in which certain women were specifically brought into this inner circle called DOS, which is an acronym for a Latin phrase which loosely translates to Lord/Master of Obedient Female Companions, or in other words, specifically female sex slaves. So the main guy that was involved in this was named Keith Raniere, or Keith Raniere. I've heard it pronounced both ways, so either way, this guy. So he was kind of the head of the organization. Now this inner circle, or DOS, was compiled of women that were largely selected by Allison Mack herself, typically picked from the pool of other NXIVM members, and this is where things got really messed up. In order for these women to join this level, they had to provide collateral. So it was something that was either found against their will, or it was they kind of provided it in the same way that you would to other cults. They kind of get to a point where they make you feel so good about yourself that you feel like you need them to function and you trust them, so you're more likely to give them these things. Like I said, it does structure itself very similar to how different addiction counseling works, except it just pushes it to that next level, that it makes you more complicit to put up with the abuse that they're putting you through when you think that it's normal. So specifically, Allison Mack was in charge of finding a lot of this collateral, and multiple ex-members have said that she was very cruel, very harsh, and very intimidating and punitive in how she dealt with those members in order to get that collateral. So like I said, this kind of collateral would include things like nude photos, dark family secrets, things that would come out in regular counseling sessions that are supposed to just kind of help you free yourself, but instead is secretly being jotted down and held in a file about you that they can use against you later. So it's like, oh, you want to leave? Well, why don't we just tell everybody about this thing that you did? Or why don't we release these photos of you? So basically, a lot of these things were retained to hold over these people's heads so they couldn't leave, so they couldn't speak out against it, and so that they would be more complicit in their dealings with the group. Mack also was heavily involved in starving and restricting food from some of these women to keep them at an ideal size of female shapeliness for Keith. And then the really big one, the one that was the real big shocker from the original video, was that they branded these girls. So one woman actually said she was told she was going to get a small tattoo just as a welcome into the group, and then, goes into a room and ends up being held down while they physically brand her with Raniere's initials. And I think at one point they said that it looked like it was a blend of Keith's initials and Allison Mack's initials. I don't know if that's come up anymore in the recent findings, but there is a possibility that it is the blend of both. But either way, these people were branded and referred to as sex slaves by Rainier, and that is multiple women have come forward saying that same thing. And now we are kind of at the tail end where Allison Mack is now pleading guilty. Originally, she pled not guilty, as did Keith, as did the other founding woman whose name is Nancy Salzman. I think Nancy and Keith are both still pleading not guilty, but Allison Mack just this week changed her plea from not guilty to guilty of racketeering charges and conspiracy to commit racketeering charges. So racketeering can kind of mean a lot of things, but typically it's just you're using some kind of coercion against another person, either through threats of bodily harm or blackmail, anything like that. So in this situation, I know originally the charges were for sex trafficking. I don't know if that's still on the table, or if I thought racketeering charges were more intense than that, maybe this is actually some kind of like plea down, so it's better for her. I know for each charge, she can face up to 20 years at this point, but it's hard to say if she would even face that. And I'm assuming her pleading guilty is to get leniency. I guess it just probably got to the point where they were like, look, we got you dead to rights. If you want to work with us, if you want to provide information against Keith and NXIVM and the DOS as a whole, we'll work with you, but you have to plead guilty. I'm assuming that's kind of the situation that's happening here. Also, one thing I didn't know, the heiress to the Seagram liquor fortune is one of several people being charged. Claire Bronfman. I guess she was also heavily involved, specifically that she was financing and aggressively pursuing long-running lawsuits against NXIVM and enemies, both perceived and real. So she's kind of going down for some different charges. But anyways, like I said, the most recent update in this is that Allison Mack did come forward to plead guilty, but she's kind of doing that double-sided thing. She's both admitting guilt, but then saying she's a victim. And I kind of brought that up in my original video, that I assumed that if she went to trial with this, she was going to push herself as being a victim of Keith, and to an extent, she is, but at a certain standpoint, we all have to be held accountable to our own actions, and based on the descriptions that other people provided of her involvement, she didn't seem like she was really being, forced into a lot of it. I think it's one of these things that it was a natural progression, and then it just started feeling normal after a while, the same way that it often does in cults, but people do have to be held accountable for their actions. So even if she did start off as a victim, and I feel terrible if she got roped into this as somebody who was just genuinely looking for help with anxiety and struggles with life, and just looking for a better perspective on the world, and this is what it led to. I do feel for that. I can't feel bad for her at the tail end of this and how the situation turned out. She literally ruined people's lives. She physically branded people. She held people essentially, sex slave prisoners to this man, and they couldn't leave. And apparently last month, Rainier actually got hit with additional charges where he allegedly was engaged in a relationship with a 15-year-old girl, and she had sent him images which constitute as child pornography. So he has child pornography charges added to the slew of other things that he's done. And prosecutors are alleging that this is not an exclusive situation, and that Mack was complicit and aware that these relationships were going on with underage girls. So there's just a lot of different levels of potential guilt going on here. So I don't feel bad for her. It's one of these things that at some point in this stage, I would feel bad for her from a victim. But at this point, she's the predator. She's just as much the predator as he is. She is the one that facilitates it. She is the female that other women felt comfortable talking to as the liaison to get them into his bed. She basically just used her position as a woman to take advantage of other people who were potentially in the same position she had once been in. And that's just messed up. So her specific quote was, "I'm very sorry for the victims of this case. I'm very sorry for who I've hurt through my misguided adherence to Keith Rainier's teaching." So she's kind of just saying like, I didn't realize that it was wrong. I was misguided. At some point, that kind of stops being an excuse when you're physically branding people and they're screaming. But her guilty plea means that she will not be going to trial with the other members involved in the case because they've, like I mentioned, all said that they have, for one, have pled not guilty and also just denied any wrongdoing at all. Keith is still maintaining that it was all consensual, that everything was on the up and up. So I guess we'll just kind of have to see What happens here? I'm really interested to see what goes on once the rest of the case goes forward, and like how the trial with Rainier goes. Apparently those opening statements are scheduled for the 29th of the month, so it won't be that long until we hear some more on this. But yeah, this whole situation is really disgusting. Unfortunately, we live in a world where people frequently deal with a lot of, mental health issues. People feel like they don't belong in the world. People deal with anxiety and stress and struggling to feel like empowered, men and women. And sometimes people sense that, and rather than doing the right thing and actually helping people, they see it as something that they can exploit and take advantage of for monetary or, personal gain, as seen here. Because not only were these women, held accountable for paying for a bunch of these classes, a lot of them literally lost their autonomy. And it's disgusting and it's sad, and knowing that this happens pretty frequently. There's all sorts of different cults out there. If this is one that got exposed, who knows how many haven't been exposed. Then you have massive ones like Scientology, and it's wild. It's absolutely wild. It's disgusting, but I'm very interested to see what happens with this going forward. Sorry if this was a little rambly. I kind of wanted to give a little bit of like the preamble of the story, and then kind of talk about, what happened here with her pleading guilty. And my lack of sleep lately is just making it very difficult for me to structure my thoughts. But yeah, let me know what you guys are thinking in the comments section down below. Have you been keeping up with this story? Did you miss it the first time around? So this is just like some massive shock, but yeah, this was, in my opinion, pretty wild. So let me know what you guys are thinking. Have a fantastic day, and we'll catch you all later.